Welcome back to Movie Recaps. Today, we dive into a timeless Christmas classic from 1935. Scrooge with Seymour Hicks. One of the first adaptations of the ageless tale by Charles Dickens, filled with fantasy, drama, and a whole lot of Christmas. The film begins with the Christmas Carol, The First Noel, being played by a group of inexperienced street musicians with untuned instruments. The scene progresses to Scrooge sitting by his table, writing a rejection letter to his nephew's invitation for Christmas dinner. Two men entered at that point, seeking charity donations for the poor and destitute. Scrooge vehemently refused to donate to the charity, suggesting that the people go to prison, or better yet, the grave, than to be given his money, that he didn't even make much at that time of year. He then rudely ushers them through his door. His employee, Mr. Cratchit, quietly tries to collect some coal from the stash in the house to build up the fire, as the inside of his house was getting cold. He was aggressively told off by Scrooge, who indicated that he did not purchase the coal, and as such, he cannot afford to be reckless with it. Scrooge further highlights that he wasn't cold, so he doesn't see why Mr. Cratchit should be. He continued berating Mr. Cratchit a while longer, asking about his family, then telling him to get back to work so he can be worth what he's paying him. Scrooge's nephew barged through the door as chirpy as a bird. He barged, of course, right into Scrooge's terrible mood, trying in vain to convince his uncle to not be such a humbug. Scrooge crassly tells him that if he had Christmas his way, every fool that goes about saying Merry Christmas should be boiled with his own pudding and buried with a stake of holly through his heart. His nephew continues to try and win over his uncle by sharing what a marvelous season it was, to which Mr. Cratchit agreed. He was unfortunately met, however, with a threat of losing his job if he spoke again. Scrooge's nephew left with his spirits high after failing again to invite his uncle to Christmas dinner. Child carolers came to Scrooge's window singing, and he immediately chases them off as the clock tolls to announce the end of the workday, where both Scrooge and Mr. Cratchit leave for home. The entire town is alive with Christmas celebration as Scrooge weaves his way through, trying to make it home. He stops at a little pub while the celebrations and preparations for Christmas escalate and continue. Chicken roasting, party going, children playing, amongst a host of other things. While back at the pub, Scrooge asks for the music playing outside to be stopped immediately. A Christmas Eve party is being held. Everyone dressed in their finest, raise their glasses and sing their toast to the Queen. Scrooge leaves the pub and finally makes his way home. Scrooge makes his way around his home with a candle, frightened at one point by his coat that was hung up, seemingly taking the form of a man. He then sat down to have his night tea and soundly hears the sound of bells ringing and then the slam of a door. A bit scared by all that happens, he turns slowly to see the door open. Jacob Marley enters and warns Scrooge that he needs to change his behavior and accept Christmas and warmth into his heart, or he would be made to spend his afterlife in the same miserable fate as Jacob, wandering the earth with no rest. Terrified by what he alone could see, Scrooge begged to hear comforting words from his late partner, but only heard continued doom. He was told to expect three spirits, the ghost of the past, present, and future, to help him on his quest to change his attitude. Scrooge later heads to bed, and as soon as the clock struck 12, he was visited by the spirit of Christmas past, who would show him how he was in the past and the effects of it. He saw himself tell a couple that their money had become due, and he planned to show no kindness to them. His fiancée at the time watched all that happened, and because she saw how much of a miser he was and how unkind he was with his money, she took his ring off and left him there. Scrooge is then led by the ghost of Christmas past to see that his ex-fiancée had married another man and was quite happy with their many children. Scrooge cries in despair and begs to be taken back. He was soon returned to his bed. Shortly after, however, Scrooge was visited by the ghost of Christmas present, who took him to his employee Bob Cratchit's home. He finds that Mr. Cratchit indeed had a very large family, but still very much enjoyed themselves with all love and happiness together, even though they did not have much. Scrooge learns that Mr. Cratchit had a sick son who would surely die if things did not change soon. Scrooge looks on as the little sick child sings a Christmas carol for his family. The spirit then takes him to see how other persons celebrated Christmas. He saw two men clinking mugs, toasting to the season, men on a ship in stormy waters. He was even taken to his nephew's home to find them there, all happy and joyful and having a good laugh at his expense. The celebrations continued with mirth and cheer. Scrooge again is wakened from his seeming slumber, where he is now taken by the ghost of Christmas yet to come. Scrooge arrives to find a group of men speaking about the death of someone. None of the men showed any sadness or remorse for the person. Scrooge questions why he wasn't in his designated place and is then taken by the spirit to see a charwoman trading items that looked very familiar to his own. The spirit then leads him to see the Cratchit family, now in mourning, as their child had died. They sat and recollected happy times while they prepared everything for his funeral that coming Sunday. Mr. Cratchit sits at the bed of his dead son in sorrow as he was saying his goodbyes. He re-enters the main room with his family and speaks encouraging words to his family. Scrooge requested to know who the dead man was no one cared for. The spirit took him to the cemetery and showed him a headstone with his name on it. He then realizes that a year into the future, it would be him that had died, and his items traded off without care. Scrooge cries out at the realization, affirming that he would change his ways as he anxiously tries to rub his name from the headstone. He awakens in fright and repentance, thanking his dead partner for coming to show him the error of his ways and promising again that he would change. Excited to be alive, he runs to answer a knock at the door, frightening the poor charwoman at the door. With renewed purpose, he quickly opens his window and shouts out "Merry Christmas" to the first boy he sees, just to confirm it was still Christmas Day and he hadn't missed it. He then sends the boy to a corner shop to purchase a turkey for Mr. Cratchit and family, then runs to prepare himself. The boy returns to tell him the shop was closed. Scrooge immediately runs out to get it for himself and in his exuberance gets himself covered in snow. After securing that he would get the turkey, he runs home again to get ready and meets the shop owner and the little boy at the door with the turkey. He pays them both and arranges to have the turkey delivered to the Cratchits. Scrooge hastens along and meets upon the men who asked for charity donations from the beginning of the movie and promises to donate a big figure of cash to the cause. He continued to his nephew's home for dinner, shocking everyone upon his arrival, but was still generously invited in. The scene changes and shows Mr. Cratchit hurriedly aiming to get to work on time. When he gets to work, he tries to sneak in, but Scrooge was there waiting on him. Scrooge, now a new man, tricked Mr. Cratchit into believing that he was upset with him for being late and surprised him with the news of an increase in salary and that he would become a second father to his sick son. Scrooge also gave him the day off. The movie wraps up with Scrooge walking into a Christmas service at a church, where the congregation sang "Hark the Herald Angels Sing." He was a renewed man. I highly recommend this movie, and if you like this video, hit the like button. If you love it, subscribe for more.